Well, I mean, so forgive me, I'm using some notes. It's been a long week already. So as I said, since it was all about the point of departure for the curation of this project was all about Glissons, the open boat. So I decided to reread that in preparation and kind of had a look at what may be an interesting point of departure specifically for this conversation. So I was leaning more towards the end of the text. And then one sentence reads, relation is not made up of things that are foreign, but of shared knowledge. And I wanted to really get, and Diana Sapita, you all spoke about this already as well, how you kind of rediscover or reconnect with heritage, with ancestral methods of researching plant and dyes, of working with clay. And we get to Jean-Louis as well, of course. And so I wanted for you to speak a bit how that kind of connects with your practice specifically.
Yes, I work a lot with these traditions. I'm thinking about this ancestral knowledge that is not necessarily well documented. So when I started my research about 3 years ago around these specific dyes that come from Latin America, from indigenous groups in Latin America, specifically my family, like Quechua indigenous in Peru, and then my dad's side of Dominican Republic. So I'm thinking about, these traditions and how I can preserve them. So in my work, I like to create these pieces that will outlast and like kind of become a record of these colors, of these dyes, of these plants, and then the combination of not just creating these quilts, but also teaching workshops in different places. I've taught workshops here at different organizations. I just completed a project with the PAM where I was teaching this creative aging group that was 55 and better. And they were teaching me at the same time, telling me that they were surprised that they could learn new things, at their age. They're also sharing their knowledge about how their mom taught them how to sew and how their grandmother taught them these dyes and how they're getting like these flashbacks to the past and this ancestral knowledge. So I think of textiles as one of those mediums that hasn't been colonized, that has been able to last for many centuries because of, I think the Europeans did not really find them as valuable as, let's say, gold or silver when they were in like just arriving to the Americas. So yeah, that's why I'm so passionate about textiles and that knowledge that's been passed down.
Through the dyes, it's like a connection also to land and nature in your case, right? Because you do so much research on all the different plants, etc.
Yeah, that connection is really important too. I think we've lost touch with nature, and I come from a family that my dad is an agriculture engineer, and my mom was very heavily into gardening and more of like the indigenous practices around nature and medicinal things. Like to this day, if I get sick or something happens or she gets sick, she's not going to take a pill. She's going to go into the backyard and find the plants that work for what you need in your body. So I've grown up in that environment and just, brought that into my practice in that way, like researching and connecting to the land and then wanting to bring that out in other people too, and kind of promote this idea of our connection and to the past and to nature.
Yeah, so when it comes to, I would say I would rephrase it from rediscovery to discovery because I grew up in the Bahamas, but I was raised by my mother who's Colombian. And she lived in Colombia up until she had to have me. So in a lot of my upbringing, I was raised within like Colombian ways in the Bahamas. And I didn't realize until, I got older and moved away for college that I didn't know anything about either of these countries that I was allegedly from, well, that I'm from. And so it was always a disconnect with both cultures because even though I was raised Colombian concerning like my actual family in Colombia, which is a lot of them, I don't have the kind of relationship that when I observe other families, I don't feel that connection that they have. And so I when I discovered clay, it was on a trip when my mother took me back to Colombia. And she took me to this little town called Rakira. And it's one of the many towns in Colombia that essentially dedicates their whole thing is clay. And in there is where I learned, the material, and then I saw kind of like how it worked. And I don't know, just seeing how it was so intertwined into their life. It was like they had their shops in the front, they had their workshop in the back, and they like lived either like on top or like behind. And it was just like everything in one. So every family had their own kind of like setup. And I don't know, I fell in love with the material from then on. And then when I got back to the Bahamas, I wasn't able to continue that practice because it wasn't something, and still to this day, it's not even very accessible because of where we're located, and we have a lot of big importing practices. We don't have a lot of local things. So when it comes to just art in general, the accessibility is very limited in comparison to other countries. So through that, I just used I went to school in Canada. So that's where I was able to continue the practice. And that's also through the practice, I was able to get into community work. And so I've worked with a lot of nonprofit organizations. And that's where it kind of sparked in me that I have this sole mission to make ceramics accessible. Because even when I found myself in a country where it should be accessible, it was, and it's so funny that you say that textiles is one of those materials and mediums that hasn't been just like, like colonized, and it just was of little interest to colonizers. Ceramics, I think, has this huge wall up, because when I got there, it's like either you're paying a ridiculous amount to, join a ceramic studio to just be able to make pieces like freely, or you have to commit to this like 4-week, 8-week class that costs upward of like $1,000. There's no really like, no accessibility. And the materials are like crazily priced. And then it got me thinking, I was just like, how is this material that has been integrated in so many like cultures like Africa, Latin America, Asia, like how has this come so far where it's like people of color aren't in a lot of those spaces? And then when you do see a lot of artists, they just have their own setup. A lot of them are not a part of the studios. So a lot of the studios are predominantly white people. And that's kind of just like, I don't know, the pottery aesthetic. And so in Toronto, so it was my sole mission to make it accessible. So I was doing Uber Eats one day. So I was like driving because I needed money. And then in the middle of an order and in the middle of me in life, I was looking for a ceramic studio that I could afford, that I can just join. I stumbled upon this like hand-drawn sign that said pottery studio, literally across the street from where I was staying. And I had Googled so many places and it was taking me up and down. And I was just like, I'm never going to find a studio. And then I see it. I cancel the order immediately. And I go into the studio and I call the number. It's like the weirdest place to get into, but it just felt like fate. And from then on, so that studio is United Spirit Ceramics. It's the studio that got shut down during the pandemic, and it was a part of Victoria Park community. So in Toronto, it is a community where mostly immigrants are placed when they first enter the country. And then it's kind of like a transitional space for them. But that ceramic studio served that community. So for the people in the community, it was free. So it was not a public studio. But due to the pandemic, it was no longer a thing. It was just like kind of run down. But the guy who was running it just like puttered around constantly. So I gained a lot of knowledge from him. And then through that, I reactivated the space with him by hosting affordable classes for people in the community. And through the funding of that, we were able to reinitiate the program for the kids and residents in the community because we had the funding from the paid classes. So I veered very far from the point, didn't I?
What I was getting at, really. and how difficult it is to work with clay in the Bahamas, and how often you have to like reuse clay that you find from various sources, and how that though connects you through your practice to your Colombian and Bahamian heritage. But I think that would be really interesting how you continue that in the Bahamas as well. And we do get to the mentorship in just a moment as well.
Oh, yeah. So in the Bahamas, we have a university that has a ceramic program, and the only importer of clay in the Bahamas is the university's bookstore. And so local artists have to share that supply with the university students. So anytime you would go, if you're lucky, you can get what you need, but it limits you a lot. And so that kind of like got me thinking. I was just like, why do so many places in the world, especially coming from Colombia, Colombia has so many clay sources. And so I was just like, there has to be some way, because there's other islands like around us that have a rich ceramic history, like they have museums about them in their own countries. And I'm just like, we're so close, like in proximity, why didn't we have one? So I am in the middle of researching that. And essentially my goal with my research is to provide local clay sources for Bahamian artists so that we can reduce the importation of clay and just art supplies in general. I'm very big on trying to do things locally, and I think it is possible. It's just, you just put in the time and effort. But yeah, I have done an experiment on it, and I have one of my pieces, actually, I was able to process the clay and create a piece with it to completion. It does have its kinks, and it's still like in the works of becoming like something that other artists can, like that I'm able to comfortably give off to an artist and be like, you can make your work with this. It's safe clay. But I'm sure this will take me a while to figure out, but it's fun nonetheless, and I love learning. So
I have to admit, I'm the least familiar with journalist Senatus' work, and I only encountered it this week for the first time, which I'm very grateful for. But I do want you to also speak a bit about how you look at like connection to ancestry or passing on of knowledge in your work.
Ok. J'ai deux tableaux qui sont exposés dans la salle. Il y en a une qui parle un peu de la vie, parce que celle qui est en jaune, ça parle un peu de la vie, parce que de l'espoir. Parce qu'en Haïti, nous confrontons un grave problème de compréhension. Mais ça a quand même reflété sur la peinture haïtienne. Ça pourrait aussi refléter aussi sur nos conceptions de vie. Parce que il y a une autre quand même toile, et il y a quand même des globes. Il y a un monsieur quand même qui est assis là-dessus. C'est un monsieur quand même qui est en train de penser de la vie, de penser ce qui est vraiment, ce qui se passe en Haïti, les difficultés que nous confrontons, et enfin, les problèmes qui se posent, parce qu'il n'arrive pas vraiment avoir une solution de vivre, une solution qui pourrait lui aider quand même d'avoir une vie meilleure. Il est resté quand même dans un coin, ou bien dans un coin comme ça, et en train de réfléchir de la vie, de parler de ce qui est bon, ou bien de ce qui est mauvais au fond de lui-même. Mais il y a un main quand même qui se présente, ça c'est la main du pouvoir quand même, et qui est là, juste pour protéger les globes quand même qui sont à la dérive. Alors, parce qu'en Haïti, il y a un problème qui est très difficile en Haïti, parce que pour nous, les Haïtiens, et parfois un artiste, c'est facile quand même de trouver une possibilité de mettre ses pensées à travers une toile pour parler de ces histoires. Et sincèrement, parce que les tableaux qui sont là, il y a quand même un rapport avec mon pays. Il y a aussi un sentiment quand même de tristesse quand même qui se dégage à travers les tableaux qui sont là. Et parfois, c'est pas vraiment très important pour nous de penser à ça, mais quand même c'est une histoire haïtienne. Ce que nous confrontons, quand même, c'est difficile pour nous. Alors, les tableaux quand même qui sont là, il y a un rapport de la politique, de notre situation, ce que nous vivons. Oui, mais quand même, il y a un rapport entre, il y a un rapport entre les passés et les présents. Parce que si je parle quand même, c'est toujours dans les mêmes bateaux. Parce que ce que nous confrontons en Haïti, et ça reste et demain. Je n'ai pas besoin d'aller plus loin et ni aller plus près parce que quand même c'est une histoire ancienne c'est la continuité des choses en Haïti. Il n'y a pas vraiment une amélioration en Haïti. Que vraiment le peuple cherche quand même à avoir une opportunité de vivre, mais on ne peut pas l'avoir. Je pense pour moi la seule chose quand même qui doit être en priorité, c'est la compréhension. Avec la compréhension, on peut voir beaucoup de choses, on peut comprendre beaucoup de choses. Yeah, wisdom, c'est une chose. Alors, et c'est parce que, comme je vous ai dit tout à l'heure, parce que j'ai peint la peinture abstraite, c'est parce que la peinture abstraite, ça me donne la facilité de m'exprimer un peu plus large. Un peu plus large. C'est très difficile quand même parce que je ne suis pas stable ici. Je suis de passage. Ah oui, j'ai quand même, je donne, je travaille. Je travaille avec des jeunes peintres comme ça. Mais je pourrais, si j'habite ici, je pourrais quand même vous aider si vous voulez avoir un peu de connaissances et je pourrais quand même vous aider. Do you want to work with me?
Always, of course, absolutely.
Me too, you know. It's difficult for me to help you, you know. But I don't have. You have the opportunity, you know, to do it. I live far. I live far. I live the Fort Myers. The Fort Myers. I take the time for coming here.
That's
I don't know where do you live. You know, you forget.
Well, I'm not a very talented painter, so I'd rather learn from you in terms of what you're thinking, and appreciate the work. So,
Yeah, I think it's difficult, you know.
unfortunately, I'm not a talented
difficult,
painter
you know.
myself.
Oh, yeah, it is. Outside of my practice, I continue to work with nonprofits in the Bahamas. So a big part of my thing was learning the infrastructure of kind of the community programming that they have in Canada, which is, really good, and implementing that into the Bahamas so that we're able to, at least come close to the amount of community programming that they have. So I do a lot of ceramic workshops. I teach people the basic hand building methods. I personally like to keep it very traditional. I know a lot of people do like hopping on the wheel, so we do offer that, but my main go-to concerning ceramics is the traditional hand building methods that I believe most countries have. There's not really too much difference other than just like the style of ceramics that they do. And I also am in the process of learning to extend that not only into the making of the piece, like the actual molding of the clay, but into the process of firing, because a big restriction on, just us getting some clay and just making it is like, okay, how do I fire this and make this, functional or, like just last over time? And it's the firing process, because typically you would need a kiln, which is electric, and it takes a lot of power. So it's also not, very friendly to the environment. A lot of the practices that are in ceramics in the modern day now are not sustainable. And so I also like to practice that when I, give the workshops. And I also like to educate mostly youth on essentially the history so far that I'm also unraveling and learning. But yeah, pit firing, brick kiln firing, gas firing. There's so many other alternatives that you just need someone to, I guess, start up. And then that's when the accessibility happens. Oh, it's great because ceramics is not something that's practiced widely in the Bahamas at all. And if it's a part of our culture, I believe that it's something that should be integrated even into the educational system, because we do have like national art exams and stuff like that. Ceramics is not something that you see. There are also so many programs internationally that ceramic artists because it's such a small, I think, part of the art world, there's a lot of opportunity when it comes to funding and expanding your education. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I think it's very important to integrate that into, the Bahamas so that it can broaden the opportunity for just future generations in sharing, especially, our history and culture.
Yeah, I agree. That's really important. The history and culture and like making sure that it can live on. And that's really what like has inspired the workshops that I've been doing. And they've been happening in different ways. So yeah, so the workshops that I've been doing have happened in different iterations. It's kind of similar where I'm kind of, I think, creating my own curriculum or way of teaching, because they're not things that have been established and have like a exact way, a method that's recorded. I mean, I have my my background in textile design and my undergrad that I did at MICA in Baltimore. So in that way, I have the technical knowledge and there is a method of teaching it when it comes to textiles and dyeing and things like that. But I did feel when I was learning from my professors and I wasn't getting the full cultural context of the methods. There was no connection. And it's wild because, I mean, I just came today from Open Studios. I was at my studio at Ulite Arts. It's on the beach. And I was talking to somebody about how, in my studio, about how when I finished my undergrad, when I finished like all of those classes around dyeing where like they're teaching me all of the techniques. I still have the binder with every sample that I made of every color. You would think that I would be super excited, but by the end of it, I was super burnt out. So I think that there is a disconnect, again, to nature, even or to the technique and the tradition. So within my workshops, I really want people to feel that connection, to see the actual plant. Sometimes I'll bring in the plant itself to the workshop, have people ask me all the time, like, oh, well, indigo, like I've seen it on t-shirts. It's very common. It's like one of the most common dyes in workshops that you'll find, but no one really, or a lot of people don't realize that it's an actual plant. Until I mention it's a leaf, it comes from a plant, and it's fermented, and there's this whole process. It's alive. So just giving people that connection again to the natural landscape, to the culture, and then bringing that all together into the actual making process. So it's not just like these are the technical skills. So throughout this year, I've been teaching. Like I said, at PAM, I did a series of workshops since August. So that I created a curriculum. So I had, it was a repeating series of workshops. So I was teaching twice a week since August. And that was really fun to see how people like progress in their knowledge of like, and they're experimenting. So at the beginning, you see people kind of like, I guess, restricted or just kind of afraid of making mistakes. And when you work with natural dyes, you have to let go. You're working with nature. So like at the end of the day, you can't control nature. It's something that we want to do, I think, as humans. So I just really loved seeing how people over the course of the different classes will like let go and kind of just, oh, this color happened when I mixed turmeric and I mixed Spanish moss and I mixed cochinilla, and now I have this beautiful orange that it's burnt, and I didn't expect that, but I love it. So it's really cool to see that and give people like that connection, but also I get something in return. It's like it's a symbiotic relationship.
Well, I mean, anybody who hasn't done that yet, I was lucky enough to actually do a workshop, and Lee here too as well. We did one with Diana in the Everglades as part of the artist in residence there. And we learned so much, and it was a beautiful experience all day. Just also connection with nature, with knowledge, and just learning more about your research was really fascinating and special. So, and yeah, you have a work up at Ulite still, right, in the exhibition as well, because that translates into your visual arts practice also. But yeah, bringing it back a little bit to the text, there was like the second to last passage, and I wanted to read that quickly. It says, "For us and without exception, and no matter how much distance we may keep, the abyss is also a projection of and a perspective into the unknown. Beyond this chasm, we gamble on the unknown. We take sides in this game of the world. We hail a renewed Indies. We are for it. And for this relation made of storms and profound moments of peace in which we may honor our boats." So I was just kind of to bringing it together. I was thinking how, as holders of cultural practice, of cultural knowledge, as, owners of your artistic voice, like what are some of the challenges, but also some of the opportunities and what you look forward to in this, this journey of moving your practice forward, but also alongside the cultural knowledge and practice in general.
Et pour moi, sincèrement, ce qui est le plus important surtout, c'est la compréhension. Parce que si vous avez appliqué la compréhension de votre vie, vous pouvez affronter. Parce que pour moi, il n'y a rien dans ce monde. Seulement la compréhension qui est importante. Sans la compréhension, même si vraiment vous voulez vraiment affronter vraiment une technique ou bien pour faire quelque chose, mais il faut avoir quand même la communication entre vous-même. Si vous n'avez pas la communication entre vous-même, vous ne pouvez pas vraiment faire sortir quelque chose de bon. Pour moi, la vie reste pareille. Il n'y a pas vraiment de grands changements. Les grands changements, ça se sort au fond de la personne. Si vous n'avez pas la compréhension, vous ne pouvez pas vraiment faire sortir des choses importantes. Il faut avoir l'harmonie entre vous-même. Parce que pour moi, je suis peintre, j'aime la peinture. La peinture, c'est ma vie. J'aime ça. Mais ici, il faut avoir aussi la compréhension. Parce que sans la compréhension, sans la discipline, vous ne pouvez pas vraiment devenir un bon peintre. Vous ne pouvez pas vraiment affronter ce qui est vraiment de bon dans la vie. Il faut avoir la compréhension, il faut appliquer la compréhension, même dans votre vie. Alors pour moi, la vie, c'est pareil, c'est la compréhension. Et sincèrement, j'ai fait pas mal de choses dans la peinture. Et j'ai réalisé beaucoup d'étoiles qui me plaisent et qui plaisent aussi à mes clients. Mais je cherche toujours à faire des choses encore parce que pour moi, il y a des choses très importantes dans la vie que je dois affronter. C'est moi quand même qui dois trouver la possibilité de le faire. Personne ne le fera pour moi. Parce que pour moi, la vie, il n'y a pas vraiment... C'est la compréhension. La compréhension doit être appliquée dans toutes les choses que vous faites. Si vous n'avez pas la possibilité d'appliquer la compréhension, vous ne pouvez pas vraiment affronter. Quel que soit qui se présente en vous ou bien à côté de vous, il faut avoir la confiance, il faut avoir la possibilité de le faire.
I'm looking forward to, in my personal artwork style, I'm looking forward to working more with my community to create my pieces. I'm not sure if all of you are familiar with my piece in the beginning with the giant wind chime. Essentially, I created that when I first moved back to the Bahamas in April with everybody around me that has supported me within my transition back to the Bahamas, and then also with trying to navigate, this new creative space that I haven't been a part of, but it's been developing the entire time that I was gone. And so that I have found so much gratitude and purpose with incorporating the people around me into my works. I love how it is it is a way of us to spend time together, which is something that I've been missing for like the past 8 years while I've been gone. Just spending more time with family, creating more works. And I don't know, it's kind of just like the works are also just like a documentation of like these like shared experiences we've had together. And then it's also so nice to see like other people who don't consider themselves, like artists, but they're just like, I helped make that, and it's being shown in like so many places. And so they should also feel proud that the piece has made it this far as well. Other than that, I'm excited for, sharing my knowledge with anybody who will spare an ear. I'm excited for developing, the Bahamian culture concerning ceramics, and uncovering and learning more towards that. I hope to really be able to create, a local source for artists, concerning clay, and just propelling the practices of, the traditional methods of ceramics, and just retaining that part of the culture in hopes that it can live beyond, me. And there are also other people who are engaging in this topic. So those are my hopes. Oh, yes, those are my goals. Those are my goals. Yes, manifestation verbally.
I definitely want to take a workshop
Oh,
with
yeah.
you.
Come
Are you
through.
doing any here?
No, I am based in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
But maybe.
Yeah, it's
I
not
know,
that
take
far.
a trip.
It's not that far.
Hopefully, I'm hoping to have
It's
this-
further for him. He's in Fort Myers, so you'd have to
Yeah.
but yeah, I would love
Yeah.
to take a
Oh,
workshop
yeah.
for sure.
For sure. If you're
Yeah.
ever in the Bahamas,
Yeah.
come. I will teach you.
Okay. As for me, what I'm excited about, looking forward, we're on the precipice of 2024. So I'm already planning for next year. A big thing for me is just time. I feel like I will have a lot of it next year. I have a residency right now that's 2 years long at ULAI, like I mentioned, and I just completed my first year. So I have another year left, and I feel like I just got into the groove, just found my comfort in the space. Been doing workshops out of the space as well. And then partnered with different organizations, with ARI, with Pam, maybe hopefully in the future Young Arts, and just want to expand what the workshops I'm doing in the spaces that I'm in. So using my platform of having the studio space for another year to host those workshops in there. I'll have a larger space next year, so I'm super excited about that. And just making things, just really excited to just get back into the groove of making, because I feel like I've been making, very excited about it, and then have all these ideas, and then I kind of get stuck in the motions of everyday life, and doing things to make money or whatever on the side, or projects that are maybe not as relevant to the quilting that I want to be doing. So next year, aside from the studio space, it comes with the housing stipend. So I think this monthly stipend will just allow me to just focus. So I'm really grateful for that. And yeah, again, just using the resources that I am going to be given next year to share and to then enrich what I'm doing with other people in my community. And hopefully maybe I'll go to Bahamas, and then we can do a workshop together or something. I don't know. I'll do
collab.
a little
You try ceramics, I'll try textiles. We'll have it.
something like that. Yeah, I'll go Fort Myers too. But I know you're not doing workshops and things, but yeah, it's just great to have these connections, is what I'm saying, and connect with people. Yeah.
Et pour moi, la vie est tellement difficile, mais la vie n'est pas difficile. Parce que pourquoi j'ai dit ça, c'est la compréhension. Parce qu'il y a des choses qui se passent dans la vie qu'on ne peut pas comprendre. Mais ce qui est le plus important, il faut avoir l'harmonisation. Et il y a des choses qui m'arrivent qui m'arrivent parfois, et ça m'a beaucoup tracassé. Mais quand je suis rentré dans moi-même, ça passe aussi vite comme ça. Ça passe inaperçu. Il y a des choses même qui sont très mauvaises de la vie, mais il y a aussi des choses. Et la mauvaiseté, c'est la compréhension parfois qui est important. Parce que moi, je cherche à comprendre ce qui est beau et ce qui est mauvais. Parfois, je n'arrive pas même à comprendre les deux. Parce que pourquoi? Et il y a quand même un ensemble. Et c'est que l'intérieur de la personne doit être en harmonie avec lui-même pour comprendre la vie. Parce que moi, je suis peintre, mais j'aimerais devenir un peintre. Tandis que je suis peintre, mais j'aimerais devenir un peintre parce que je cherche toujours à comprendre ce qui est bon pour moi. Parce qu'il y a tellement de choses dans la vie, on n'aura pas vraiment la possibilité de l'affronter. Parce que la peinture, c'est une chose difficile. L'art est difficile, la critique est aisée. Mais il y a aussi la compréhension, il y a aussi le vouloir de faire quelque chose de bon. Il y a aussi le vouloir de toucher le soleil. Il y a aussi le vouloir de faire quelque chose que vous n'avez pas choisi de le faire. Moi, je vais quand même affronter. Parce que la vie, il faut l'affronter. Il faut l'affronter, ce qui est difficile. Il faut chercher à comprendre. Parfois, il y a des gens qui ne voulaient pas vraiment affronter la vie ou bien ils sont peurs quand même d'affronter la vie. C'est vrai, il y a des choses vraiment qui sont difficiles, mais quand même, il faut quand même... Et alors, je reste dans l'art. Il y a quand même des choses, il faut quand même trouver un moyen de les faire. Il faut quand même trouver un moyen d'harmoniser votre vie. Il faut quand même trouver un moyen de faire quelque chose de bon, de faire quand même quelque chose qui est plus haut, qui vous dépasse. J'aimerais bien devenir peintre parce que pour moi, je ne sais rien encore. Et mon ambition, c'est de laisser une histoire pour mon future génération. Alors, si quand même je me considère comme un peintre, je ne pourrais pas vraiment laisser une histoire pour mon future génération. Je dois chercher à affronter la vie. Je dois chercher à comprendre ce qui est encore plus loin de moi. Alors pour moi, la vie, c'est vrai, la vie est difficile, mais il faut avoir la compréhension. Mais pour moi, je ne sais rien du tout. Je cherche quand même à affronter ce qui est bon pour moi.
And thank you all for participating. And thanks again, Vanessa, the whole Atlantic Arthouse team. And make sure you see all the work inside. And I think they're still here to answer any questions you may have one-on-one.